Marcus Chen never planned to become the most wanted man in three-star systems. He was just a cargo hauler, moving supplies between the outer colonies and the core worlds. His ship, the Times Wanderer **, was old, but reliable, much like Marcus himself. At 35, he had seen enough of the galaxy to know when to mind his own business and when to run from trouble. But when he saw the distress beacon coming from the dead system of Kepler 442, he couldn't ignore it. The signal was weak, almost lost in the cosmic background radiation. Any other pilot might have missed it entirely. Marcus had installed extra-sensitive receivers on his ship after getting stranded once in empty space. He learned the hard way that sometimes the difference between life and death was hearing a cry for help that others couldn't. The beacon wasn't broadcasting on any standard frequency. It was old, using encryption patterns that Marcus recognized from his time in the Colonial Defense Force. Someone important was in trouble. Marcus changed course, knowing it would cost him a week's profit in fuel and delayed delivery fees. His employer wouldn't be happy, but he had never been good at leaving people behind. It was why he left the military, actually. Too many missions where command decided some lives weren't worth the risk of saving. The Times Wanderer dropped out of hyperspace near a small, rocky moon orbiting a dead gas giant. The system had been stripped of resources decades ago and abandoned. Perfect place to hide, but also perfect place to die if your ship broke down. His sensors picked up the wreckage immediately. It was scattered across the moon's surface in a pattern that suggested a crash rather than an explosion. One large piece remained mostly intact. And that's where the beacon was coming from. Marcus suited up and took his shuttle down to the surface. The crashed ship was sleek and elegant, built with materials he didn't recognize. Definitely not human technology. The hull bore symbols that made his translation software struggle before finally displaying Imperial Vessel Times, Starfire **, property of the Zephyrian Empire. Empire. He had heard of the Zephyrians. They controlled a dozen systems spinward of human space and had a reputation for being both advanced and arrogant. They considered themselves the rightful heirs to the ancient precursor civilization that had left ruins throughout this part of the galaxy. Humans were barely tolerated as crude neighbors who had stumbled into space travel. The ship's hull had been breached in multiple places, but Marcus could see that someone had tried to seal the worst of the damage from inside. Emergency atmosphere was still holding in what looked like the main cabin. His suit's sensors detected a faint life sign. Marcus cut through the damaged airlock with his plasma torch. The interior of the ship was like nothing he had ever seen. The walls seemed to be made of living metal that shifted color as he moved past. Emergency lighting cast everything in a pale blue glow that reminded him of moonlight on water. He found her in what must have been the command center, sitting in a chair that had molded itself around her body to provide support. At first glance, she looked human, but Marcus quickly noticed the differences. Her skin had a faint silver sheen, and her eyes were larger than human normal, with irises that seemed to contain swirling galaxies of deep purple and gold. Her hair was white as starlight and fell to her shoulders in waves that seemed to move with their own breeze. She was unconscious, but her breathing was steady. A medical readout hovering in the air beside her showed vital signs in symbols Marcus couldn't read. But the colors suggested stable condition. She was wearing what looked like a form-fitting uniform made of the same color-shifting material as the ship's walls. Marcus checked his translation software again. It identified her species as Zephyrian and noted that she appeared to be wearing clothing and symbols consistent with high nobility or royalty. Great. He had found himself an alien princess. The ship's computer was still partially functional. Marcus managed to access the logs using universal interface protocols. What he learned made his blood run cold. Princess Lirelei of House Starwind had been traveling to the neutral zone for a diplomatic meeting when her ship was attacked by pirates. Not ordinary pirates, though. The logs showed that they had used weapons and tactics consistent with the hegemony, humanity's greatest enemy. The same aliens who had been trying to wipe out human colonies for the past 50 years. The princess had fought them off, but her ship was badly damaged. She had made it to this dead system before the engines failed completely. She had been here for 6 days, surviving on emergency rations and recycled air. Her distress beacon was designed only to reach other Zephyrian ships, but none had come. Marcus realized why immediately. The Zephyrians and the Hegemony had signed a non-aggression pact 3 years ago. If the Hegemony was targeting Zephyrian diplomats, it meant they were planning something big, something that required the Zephyrians to be distracted or weakened. He also realized something else. If the Hegemony had attacked this princess, they might still be watching the area. His arrival could have already been detected. Marcus worked quickly to move the princess to his shuttle. She was lighter than he expected, and there was something almost ethereal about her, as if she wasn't entirely made of ordinary matter. He set up a portable medical unit to keep her stable during transport. As he was preparing to leave, his ship's sensors screamed a warning. 3 vessels had just dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the system. The computer identified them as Hegemony hunter-killers, fast attack ships designed to eliminate witnesses and survivors. Marcus cursed under his breath. The Hegemony must have left a monitoring probe in the system, waiting to see if anyone responded to the princess's distress call. Now, they were coming to clean up their loose end. The Times Wanderer Times was fast for a cargo hauler, but she was no match for military vessels. Marcus had maybe 10 minutes before they reached the moon. He made a decision that would change his life forever. Instead of running immediately, Marcus spent precious minutes downloading everything he could from the princess's ship computer. Navigation logs, diplomatic correspondence, tactical data about Hegemony movements, information that could save human lives and expose whatever the Hegemony was planning. By the time he got back to the Times Wanderer asterisk, the Hegemony ships were only minutes out. Marcus strapped the unconscious princess into his medical bay and pushed his engines to their absolute limit. The ship groaned under the strain, but she held together. The chase lasted 18 hours. The Hegemony ships were faster, but Marcus knew every trick in the book for hiding from sensors and using gravity wells to slingshot ahead. He led them through asteroid fields and past the coronas of unstable stars, places where their superior technology was balanced out by the hazards. Finally, Marcus made it to the border of human space. The Hegemony ships broke off their pursuit rather than risk an incident with the Colonial Defense Force. But Marcus knew they would be waiting. The Hegemony had long memories and longer reach. Princess Lirelei woke up 3 days later, as the Times Wanderer Times was docking at Frontier Station. Her first words, spoken in accented but perfect English, were, "You saved me." Marcus was sitting beside her medical bed, exhausted from 3 days of constant vigilance. He looked up from the datapad where he had been studying the files from her ship, just happened to be in the neighborhood. He said with a tired smile. The princess studied him with those galaxy eyes. No human ship happens to be in dead space. You came because you heard my distress call. You risked your life to save someone you had never met. Marcus shrugged. Seemed like the right thing to do. The right thing. She repeated the words like they were in a foreign language. Do you know who I am? Do you know who I am? Princess Lirelei of House Starwind, daughter of Emperor Celestius III. Next in line for the Zephyrian throne, after your brother, Prince Valdris. Marcus had done his homework during the long trip. The princess looked surprised. You know my family, yet you still helped me. Why? Because you needed help. Marcus stood up and moved to the viewport, looking out at the docking ring of Frontier Station. I've got news for you, Princess. The attack on your ship wasn't random piracy. The Hegemony is planning something big, and they needed you out of the picture. He handed her a datapad containing his analysis of her ship's files. Your diplomatic mission was to negotiate a trade agreement with the neutral worlds, right? The kind that would give your empire resources to build up your fleet? Princess Lirelei nodded slowly. The hegemony can't afford to let that happen. They're planning to attack both human and Zephyrian space simultaneously. A two-front war. They tried to eliminate you to prevent your empire from strengthening its position. The princess read through the data, her expression growing more troubled with each page. Finally, she looked up at Marcus. This information must reach my father immediately. But I cannot return home through normal channels. If the hegemony has agents in my court, they will try again. Marcus had been thinking about the same problem. I can get you home safely, but it won't be easy. And once I do, you'll need to convince your father to warn the human colonies about what's coming. You would do this? Even knowing the danger? Marcus looked at her directly. Princess, I've seen what the hegemony does to colonies that can't defend themselves. Entire worlds turned to glass. Billions of people dead. If I can prevent that by helping you get home, then yes, I'll do it. For the first time, since she had awakened, the princess smiled. It was like watching a star come to life. I misjudged your species, Marcus Chen. Perhaps we all have. 3 hours later, as Marcus was preparing the Time's Wanderer times for departure, a squad of Colonial Defense Force soldiers boarded his ship. Their leader, a stern-faced colonel named Harrison, got straight to the point. Mr. Chen, we've received a priority communication from the Zephyrian Empire. They're demanding that you turn over Princess Lirelei immediately. 1. Receive. 1111. Marcus felt his heart sink. On whose authority? Emperor Celestius himself. Apparently, there are those in the Zephyrian court who believe you kidnapped the princess rather than rescued her. Harrison's expression was grim. They're threatening to consider any delay an act of war. That's impossible, Princess Lirelei said, entering the cargo bay where they were talking. I would never. She stopped mid-sentence, her face going pale. Marcus saw her looking at something on Harrison's uniform. A small pin on his collar. Almost too small to notice. But the princess's enhanced eyesight had caught what Marcus missed. Colonel, she said carefully, where did you get that insignia? Harrison looked down at his collar, confused. This? It's a commendation pin. Received it for service in the Kepler campaign. The princess shook her head. That symbol is not human. It is hegemony. The temperature in the cargo bay seemed to drop 10 degrees. Marcus realized what had happened. The hegemony did have agents in the Zephyrian court, but they also had them in the Colonial Defense Force. They were playing both sides, manipulating everyone to get what they wanted. Colonel Harrison's hand moved toward his sidearm, but Marcus was faster. Years of military training kicked in as he tackled the colonel to the deck. The struggle was brief, but violent. When it was over, Harrison lay unconscious, and Marcus was holding the man's weapon. We need to leave now, Marcus said, breathing hard. Princess Lirelei was already moving toward the ship's controls. I can pilot a vessel if needed. Good, because we're about to become fugitives. Marcus sealed the ship's hatches and began emergency departure procedures. Your empire won't let me go now, and neither will mine. We've got everyone hunting us. As the Time's Wanderer times cleared Frontier Station's docking ring, Marcus received a flood of communications. Demands to surrender. Threats of military action. Warnings that he was now considered an enemy of both human and Zephyrian space. Marcus looked at Princess Lirelei, who was monitoring the ship's sensors with grim efficiency. Any regrets about saving my life? She asked. Marcus thought about it for a moment, then smiled. Ask me again when this is over. Behind them, the first pursuit ships were already launching from Frontier Station. Ahead lay the vast darkness of space, and a journey that would test everything Marcus thought he knew about right and wrong. The princess had been saved, but the real adventure was just beginning. The Times, Wanderer Times, had been running dark for 48 hours, hiding in the shadow of a brown dwarf star at the edge of the Tau Ceti system. Marcus had shut down all non-essential systems to avoid detection, leaving them with minimal heat and recycled air that tasted like metal and desperation. Princess Lirelei sat across from him in the ship's tiny galley, studying a star chart with the intensity of a general planning a battle. She had adapted to their circumstances with a grace that impressed Marcus. Most royalty he had met would be demanding luxury accommodations and complaining about the food. The princess had simply asked how she could help. "There," she said, pointing to a system designation Marcus didn't recognize. "The Nexus Point. It's a neutral trading station in unclaimed space. We can resupply there without triggering any governmental alerts." Marcus looked at the route she had traced. It would take them through 3 different jump points and past 2 systems known for heavy pirate activity. "That's a dangerous path, Princess. My ship isn't built for combat. Call me Lyra," she said simply. "And I know it's dangerous. But it's our best option. The main trade routes will be watched by both our governments now." Marcus had to admit she was right. Every legitimate port in human or Zephyrian space would have their descriptions by now. Wanted fugitives, considered armed and dangerous. The irony wasn't lost on him that saving someone's life had made him a criminal in the eyes of 2 different empires. "There's something else," Lyra continued, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "I've been monitoring subspace communications. The hegemony isn't just targeting diplomatic missions anymore. 3 more ships have gone missing in the past week. 2 human cargo vessels, and a Zephyrian science expedition." Marcus felt his blood run cold. They're accelerating their timeline. Yes, whatever they're planning, it's happening soon. "We need to reach my father before it's too late to stop them." The jump to the Nexus Point took 6 hours. Marcus spent most of it working on the ship's defensive systems while Lyra analyzed the data they had recovered from her vessel. She was brilliant, he realized. Not just educated or well-trained, but genuinely intelligent in a way that cut through problems like a laser through fog. "Your species fascinates me," she said during a meal break, picking at the protein bar Marcus had offered her. "How so?" Marcus was trying to recalibrate the ship's sensor array with limited tools and growing frustration. "You make decisions based on what you believe is right, even when it costs you everything. Most species, including my own, calculate the risk versus reward before acting. But humans, you do what you think is correct and worry about consequences later." Marcus looked up from his work. "Is that good or bad?" "I'm not sure yet. It's certainly unusual." Lyra set down her food and moved closer to watch him work. "In Zephyrian culture, we plan for generations ahead. Every action is weighed against its long-term impact on the empire and the royal bloodline. Individual desires are secondary to the greater good." "Sounds lonely," Marcus said, finally getting the sensor to respond properly. "It is." The admission seemed to surprise her as much as it did him. "I have never had a friend who wasn't either a servant or someone seeking political advantage. Every conversation is calculated. Every gesture has meaning beyond what you see." Marcus paused in his work. "What about now?" "What do you mean? Right now? Are you calculating what to say to me? Looking for political advantage?" Lyra was quiet for a long moment. "No," she said finally. "For the first time in my life, I'm simply talking to someone who saved my life because he thought it was the right thing to do. Someone who asks for nothing in return." The Nexus Point was exactly what Marcus expected from a frontier trading station. It was a collection of interconnected habitation modules, cargo bays, and docking rings that had grown organically over decades. Ships from a dozen different species were docked at the various ports, creating a maze of different technologies and architectural styles. Marcus had changed the Times Wanderer's Times transponder codes and modified her hull markings as much as he could with the tools available. To casual observation, she now appeared to be the cargo hauler Times Second Chance Times registered out of the free port of Haven Station. They docked at a lower-level port where the harbor master was more interested in payment than paperwork. Marcus had enough credits to buy supplies and fuel, but not much more. Once they left the Nexus Point, they would be committed to their course of action. "I should go with you," Lyra said as Marcus prepared to leave the ship for supplies. "Too risky. Someone might recognize you." Lyra held up a small device that looked like a jewelry box. When she activated it, her appearance shifted. Her silver skin took on a more human tone, her distinctive eyes became brown, and her white hair darkened to auburn. Even her height seemed to change slightly. Holographic disguise matrix, she explained. Standard equipment for Zephyrian diplomatic personnel. Marcus stared at her transformation. That's incredibly advanced technology. Your species will develop similar capabilities in time. Humans have a talent for rapid technological advancement when motivated. She checked her appearance in a mirror. How do I look? How? Clom. Like a human cargo hauler, Marcus admitted. Okay. But stay close, and let me do the talking. The Nexus Point's main market was a sprawling bazaar where merchants from across the galaxy hawked everything from rare minerals to illegal weapon modifications. Marcus led Lyra through the crowds, heading for a supply depot he had used before. That's when he saw them. Two figures in the distinctive black uniforms of hegemony intelligence agents were questioning merchants at the far end of the market. They were showing holoprojectors displaying images that Marcus couldn't see from this distance. But he had a pretty good idea what they contained. We need to leave, he whispered to Lyra. I see them, she replied calmly. But first, look at the merchant they just finished questioning. Marcus followed her gaze and felt his stomach drop. The merchant was packing up his stall with the desperate haste of someone who had just received very bad news. More importantly, he was glancing repeatedly toward the docking bays, where the Times Wanderer Times was berthed. They know we're here, Marcus realized. Worse, they know which ship is ours. Lyra's disguise flickered slightly as her concentration wavered. They must have identified us when we docked, Marcus thought quickly. The Nexus Point had dozens of ships and thousands of people. If they moved carefully, they might be able to reach their vessel before the hegemony agents. But there was another problem. Even if we get back to the ship, they'll follow us when we leave. The Times Wanderer Times isn't fast enough to outrun a military pursuit. Lyra was looking around the market with the calculating gaze Marcus was beginning to recognize. Then we need a better ship. She was pointing toward the upper docking rings, where the more expensive vessels were berthed. Marcus could see several sleek courier ships and at least one military-grade patrol boat. I can't steal a ship, Lyra. That makes us actual criminals instead of just fugitives. What if the owner agreed to help us? Before Marcus could ask what she meant, Lyra was walking toward a tall figure examining weapon modifications at a nearby stall. The being was humanoid but clearly alien, with blue-gray skin and what looked like gills along its neck. Marcus hurried to catch up. Captain Torex, Lyra said, her disguise now projecting a completely different appearance. She looked like a young human woman with short, dark hair and the kind of confident bearing that suggested military training. The alien turned toward them, his large black eyes focusing with predatory intensity. Do I know you? We have mutual acquaintances. People who would pay handsomely for safe passage to Zephyrian space. Captain Torex's expression didn't change, but Marcus noticed his hand moving away from his sidearm. That was probably a good sign. Passage to Zephyrian space is expensive right now. Lot of military traffic. Lot of questions being asked at checkpoints. We can pay, Lyra said smoothly. 50,000 credits for passage to the border. Another 50,000 for discretion. Marcus tried not to let his shock show. He didn't have anywhere near that kind of money. He hoped Lyra knew something he didn't. 10. Captain Torex was definitely interested now. 100,000 credits is serious money. What kind of cargo are we talking about? The kind that needs to reach Emperor Celestius, quickly and quietly. The alien's eyes widened slightly. In the underworld of smugglers and privateers, there were certain names that carried weight. The Zephyrian Emperor was one of them. Docking Bay 17, Captain Torex said quietly. Ships called Times Void Runner **. Be there in 1 hour. As they walked away from the weapons merchant, Marcus grabbed Lyra's arm. Where are we going to get 100,000 credits? She smiled, and for a moment her disguise flickered to show her real face. From my personal account. The advantage of being a princess. Marcus. We're not exactly poor. They made their way back toward the docking rings, taking a circuitous route to avoid the hegemony agents. Marcus was beginning to feel like they might actually make it out when everything went wrong. A maintenance worker stepped out of a service corridor directly in front of them. But this wasn't a normal worker. Marcus recognized the implants along his skull and the way he moved. Hegemony cyber soldier. Enhanced reflexes, built-in weapons, and absolutely no mercy. Princess Lirelei, the cyber soldier said, in a voice that sounded like grinding metal. You will come with me. Lyra's disguise failed completely as her concentration broke. Her natural appearance blazed through the hologram like fire through paper. Around the market, people stopped and stared. A Zephyrian princess on the Nexus Point was news that would spread quickly. Run, Marcus said quietly. I won't leave you. The cyber soldier raised his arm, and Marcus saw the weapons ports opening along his forearm. Military-grade pulse weapons, designed to incapacitate rather than kill. They wanted the princess alive. Marcus had faced cyber soldiers before during his military service. He knew he couldn't match their speed or strength. But he also knew their weakness. They relied too heavily on their enhancements, and not enough on tactical thinking. Instead of running or attacking, Marcus grabbed a cargo sled from a nearby merchant and shoved it directly into the cyber soldier's path. The enhanced warrior leaped over it easily, but that moment of distraction was all Marcus needed. He tackled Lyra and rolled them both behind a massive shipping container, just as pulse blasts began tearing through the air where they had been standing. The market erupted in chaos as civilians ran for cover and merchants dove behind their stalls. This way, Lyra said, pointing toward a maintenance shaft in the deck plating. They dropped through the shaft into the station's lower levels, a maze of pipes and conduits that carried power and atmosphere throughout the Nexus Point. Behind them, Marcus could hear the cyber soldier giving chase, his enhanced systems allowing him to navigate the difficult terrain with ease. They ran through the mechanical spaces for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. Finally, they reached an access hatch that opened into Docking Bay 17. Captain Torex's ship times Void Runner times was exactly what Marcus had hoped for. Sleek, fast, and armed well enough to discourage casual pursuit. The captain himself was waiting at the airlock with the expression of someone who had heard about the excitement in the market. Hegemony agents, he said without preamble. This is going to cost extra. How much extra? Lyra asked. Another 50,000. And I want it transferred before we undock. Lyra was already working on a financial device that looked more advanced than any computer Marcus had ever seen. Done. Now, get us out of here. The Times Void Runner times launched from the Nexus Point, just as the first hegemony ships arrived. Marcus watched through the ship's viewports as military vessels surrounded the station, no doubt searching every vessel and questioning every person. They're serious about catching you, Captain Torex observed from the pilot's seat. Usually, the hegemony doesn't commit this many resources to capturing fugitives. We're not ordinary fugitives, Lyra said. She had dropped her disguise completely now that they were safely away from the station. We have information that could prevent a war. What kind of information? Marcus and Lyra exchanged glances. How much should they trust a smuggler they had just met? The kind that's worth dying for, Marcus said finally. Captain Torex nodded slowly. Fair enough. I won't ask again. But you should know that we're not out of danger yet. The hegemony has ships stationed at every major jump point between here and Zephyrian space. They're going to be watching for us. Do you know a way around them? Lyra asked. The alien captain's expression might have been a smile. Lady, I've been running blockades since before your empire existed. Leave it to me. For the next 3 days, the Times Void Runner times played a deadly game of cat and mouse with hegemony patrol ships. Captain Torex proved to be as skilled as he claimed, using hidden jump points and uncharted routes that only experienced smugglers knew about. Marcus found himself impressed not just by the captain's skill, but by how Lyra adapted to life aboard a smuggler's vessel. She helped with repairs, stood watch shifts, and never once complained about the cramped quarters or recycled food. "You're not what I expected from a princess," he told her during one quiet moment, while they were both on watch duty. "What did you expect?" "I don't know. More demands. More complaints about the accommodations." Lyra looked out at the stars streaming past as they traveled through hyperspace. "I've been thinking about what you said back on your ship, about doing what's right, regardless of the cost. I spent my entire life being told that my duty was to the Empire, to the bloodline, to the future of my people. But I never thought about what I owed to other people, other species, other worlds. And now I think maybe being a good princess means being a good person first. And good people don't let others suffer when they have the power to prevent it." Marcus was quiet for a moment. "Your father might not see it that way. Then I'll have to convince him. With your help. You still want my help? Even after everything that's happened? Even knowing that helping you has made me an enemy of my own government?" Lyra turned to look at him directly. "Marcus, you saved my life when you had nothing to gain and everything to lose. You've protected me, risked everything for me, and asked for nothing in return. If that's not the definition of a hero, I don't know what is. I'm no hero." "Yes," she said softly. "You are. And that choice is going to save both our peoples." Captain Torex's voice crackled over the ship's intercom. "We're approaching the Zephyrian border, and we've got company. 3 hegemony battlecruisers just dropped out of hyperspace ahead of us." Marcus and Lyra hurried to the bridge, where Captain Torex was studying his sensor readings with grim concentration. "They're blocking the main entry point into Zephyrian space," the captain reported. "And they're hailing us." "Don't respond," Lyra said quickly. "Princess, they have enough firepower to turn us into space dust. Maybe we should talk to them." Lyra shook her head. "The moment we acknowledge their hail, they'll demand we surrender. And if we do that, everything we've learned dies with us." Marcus looked at the tactical display. 3 military vessels against 1 smuggler's ship. The odds were impossible. "Captain, do you know any other way into Zephyrian space?" Captain Torex was quiet for a long moment. "There is one way. But it's suicide." "Tell me." "The Shattered Zone. It's a region where an ancient battle destroyed most of a solar system. Debris fields, radiation storms, gravity anomalies. No one goes there because no one comes back." "But there's a way through?" Lyra asked. "Maybe, if we're very skilled and very lucky. And if the princess here really is as important as she claims to be." Lyra straightened in her seat. "I am Princess Lyrelei of House Starwind, heir to the Zephyrian throne, daughter of Emperor Celestius III, and I am ordering you to take us through the Shattered Zone." Captain Torex studied her for a moment, then smiled. "Yes, Your Highness. Hold on to something. This is going to be interesting." As the Time's Voidrunner times changed course toward the Shattered Zone, Marcus realized that their real adventure was just beginning. Behind them, the hegemony battlecruisers were giving chase. Ahead lay a region of space that had claimed hundreds of ships over the decades. But somewhere beyond that lay Zephyrian space, and the Emperor who needed to hear their warning before it was too late. The Shattered Zone looked like the grave of gods. Marcus stared through the Time's Voidrunner's Time's viewports at the remains of what had once been a solar system. Massive chunks of planetary debris drifted in twisted orbits around a dying star. Energy storms crackled between the larger fragments, creating a deadly light show that was both beautiful and terrifying. "The Battle of Kethmoran," Princess Lyrelei whispered beside him. 5,000 years ago, 2 ancient civilizations fought here with weapons that could destroy worlds. They succeeded in destroying each other. Captain Torex was studying his sensor readings with the concentration of a surgeon performing delicate operations. "The radiation levels are off the charts. We'll need to stay in the shadow of the larger debris to avoid getting fried. And those gravity wells." He shook his head. "Well, One wrong move, and we'll be pulled into a fragment and crushed. Behind them, the hegemony battlecruisers had taken position at the edge of the zone. They were maintaining their distance, clearly hoping the shattered zone would do their work for them. "They're not following us in," Marcus observed. "Smart of them," Captain Torex replied grimly. "I've lost 3 ships in here over the years. Only reason I'm willing to try now is because the princess is paying me enough to retire if we survive. Well, thanks for watching. I'm Node Those Live." The Time's Void Runner Times entered the debris field at minimum speed, threading its way between chunks of matter that ranged from the size of asteroids to small moons. Some of the debris still showed signs of artificial construction, the remains of ancient cities and space stations fused with planetary rock. "Incoming storm," Captain Torex announced. "Everyone, hold on." An energy discharge erupted from a nearby fragment, sending waves of charged particles washing over their ship. The lights flickered, and Marcus felt his hair stand on end as static electricity built up in the air. The ship's shields held, but he could hear the power systems groaning under the strain. They had been navigating the zone for 6 hours when their luck ran out. A massive gravity well, invisible to their sensors until they were almost on top of it, grabbed the Time's Void Runner Times and began pulling them toward a fragment the size of a small planet. Captain Torex fought the controls, but their engines weren't powerful enough to break free. "I can compensate for the gravity differential," Lirelei said, already working at one of the ship's control stations. "But I need to access the ship's navigation computer directly." "Do it," Captain Torex said without hesitation. Lirelei placed her hands on the control interface, and Marcus watched in amazement as her fingers seemed to merge with the ship's systems. Energy flowed between her skin and the computer, and the ship's responses became smoother, more intuitive. "Zephyrians can interface directly with technology," she explained, without taking her concentration away from the controls. "It's one of the gifts our people inherited from the ancient precursors." Working together, Lirelei and Captain Torex managed to break free from the gravity well. But the effort had cost them. Several of their systems were damaged, and their power reserves were dangerously low. "There," Lirelei said, pointing ahead to where normal space showed through gaps in the debris field. "The other side." They limped out of the shattered zone 12 hours after entering it. Marcus had never been so happy to see empty space in his life. Behind them, the debris field looked like a wall of death. He couldn't believe they had made it through. "Zephyrian patrol ships approaching," Captain Torex announced. Marcus felt his heart sink. After everything they had been through, were they going to be arrested by Lirelei's own people? "Let me handle this," Lirelei said. She activated the ship's communication system and began speaking in a language that sounded like music mixed with starlight. The response came immediately, and Marcus was surprised to hear genuine joy in the alien voices. Whatever Lirelei had told them, it was good news. "They're escorting us to the Imperial capital," she explained. "My father has been searching for me for weeks. The whole Empire thought I was dead." The journey to Zephyr Prime took 2 days. Marcus spent most of that time staring out at the most beautiful star system he had ever seen. The Zephyrian homeworld orbited a binary star that cast everything in silver and gold light. The planet itself seemed to glow with its own inner radiance, and the space around it was filled with cities and structures that looked more like works of art than mere buildings. Emperor Celestius III was not what Marcus had expected. He was tall and elegant like his daughter, but there was a weight to him that spoke of centuries of ruling an interstellar empire. His eyes held the same galaxy depths as Lirelei's, but with an ancient sadness that suggested he had seen too much of war and loss. They met in the Imperial throne room, a vast chamber whose walls seemed to be made of captured starlight. Marcus felt incredibly out of place in his simple human clothes, but the Emperor greeted him with a warmth that was genuinely surprising. "Marcus Chen," the Emperor said in perfect English, "the human who saved my daughter. You have the gratitude of the entire Zephyrian Empire. Your Majesty, we need to discuss the hegemony threat," Lirelei said urgently. "The information we recovered shows their planning." "I know, daughter." The Emperor's expression grew grave. The attack on your ship was not the only one. They have struck at 17 different targets in the past month. Diplomatic missions, trade vessels, research expeditions, all eliminated to prevent information from reaching us. Marcus stepped forward. Then, you know they're planning a two-front war? We suspected. The data you recovered confirms our worst fears. The Emperor gestured, and a holographic display appeared showing star charts and military positions. The hegemony has been building up forces along both our borders. They plan to attack human and Zephyrian space simultaneously, preventing either of us from aiding the other. Can it be stopped? Lirelei asked. Perhaps. If we act quickly and coordinate our response with the human colonial defense force. The Emperor looked directly at Marcus. Which brings us to a problem. Mr. Chen, you are currently wanted by your own government for kidnapping my daughter. Marcus nodded grimly. I know. But the princess needed to get home. And, you misunderstand me, the Emperor interrupted. I am not condemning your actions. I am explaining why you cannot simply return to human space. Your own people would arrest you before you could deliver our warning. Then I'll send a message. A data transmission, which could be intercepted or dismissed as a hoax. The Emperor began walking around the chamber, his robes flowing like liquid starlight. No. What we need is a joint declaration from both our governments, delivered simultaneously to prevent the hegemony from interfering. And for that, we need you to be more than just a fugitive cargo hauler. Marcus felt a chill of premonition. What do you mean? I am offering you a position as special envoy to the human colonies, official diplomatic status with the Zephyrian Empire. It would give you the authority to speak for us in negotiations with your government. Your Majesty, I'm honored, but I'm not diplomat material. You saved my daughter when it would have been easier and safer to ignore her distress call, the Emperor said firmly. You protected her at great personal cost, asked for nothing in return, and brought crucial intelligence to us despite being hunted by multiple governments. If that does not qualify you for diplomatic service, nothing does. Lirelei moved to stand beside her father. There's more, Marcus. The hegemony won't give up. They know you have information that threatens their plans. Even if we resolve the situation with our governments, they'll keep hunting you. What are you saying? We're saying you can't go back to your old life, the Emperor explained. The moment you answered my daughter's distress call, you became a key player in events that will shape the future of this entire region of space. The hegemony will never stop trying to eliminate you. Marcus felt the weight of that truth settling on his shoulders like a lead blanket. He had saved one person's life, and in doing so had given up any chance of returning to his simple existence as a cargo hauler. But, the Emperor continued, you can choose how you face that future. As a hunted fugitive living on the margins of civilized space, or as an honored representative of the Zephyrian Empire, with all the protection and resources that entails. I need to think about this, Marcus said. Of course. Take all the time you need. But know that whatever you decide, you will always have a home here. That night, Marcus walked in the Imperial Gardens, trying to make sense of everything that had happened. The gardens were beautiful beyond description, filled with plants that seemed to generate their own light and fountains that played music as the water fell. He found Lirelei sitting beside a pool, where luminescent fish swam in patterns that looked almost like writing. Regrets? She asked, as he sat down beside her. Marcus considered the question seriously. About saving your life? Never. About how complicated everything became afterward? Maybe. Oh, I'm sorry, Marcus. You never asked for any of this. Neither did you. But we're here now, and we need to deal with it. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the glowing fish swim their mysterious patterns. If you accept my father's offer, Lirelei said eventually, you'd be the first human ever to hold official diplomatic status with our empire. It would be an honor, beyond anything your species has achieved. And if I don't, then you spend the rest of your life running from the hegemony, and probably end up dead within a year. Marcus sighed. Not much of a choice, is it? Life rarely gives us the choices we want. Only the ones we need. The next morning brought news that made Marcus's decision for him. Hegemony forces have attacked 3 human colonies, Captain Torix reported. He had remained on Zephyr Prime as their liaison with the outside galaxy. Kepler 438, Ross 128, and Gliese 667c. All 3 are reporting heavy casualties and requesting immediate assistance. Marcus felt sick. Those colonies housed millions of people. Men, women, children who had never heard of Princess Lirelei or the hegemony's plans. People whose only crime was being in the wrong place when the war began. How long until the Colonial Defense Force can respond? He asked. At least a week for the closest systems. The hegemony timed their attacks perfectly. Emperor Celestius entered the chamber. His expression grim. They struck at targets that would take the longest for your military to reach. But you could reach them sooner, Marcus realized. Yes, our fleets are positioned much closer to those systems. But we cannot act without provocation or invitation from the human government. To do so would be considered an act of war. Marcus understood. The Zephyrian Empire could save those colonies, but only if the human government officially requested their help. And the human government would never do that while they considered Marcus a fugitive and criminal. I accept, he said simply. Accept what? Lirelei asked. Your father's offer. Diplomatic status with the Zephyrian Empire. If it means I can help save those colonies, then I accept. The ceremony was surprisingly simple. Marcus knelt before the Emperor, while Lirelei stood as witness. Ancient words were spoken in the Zephyrian language, and then the Emperor placed a crystalline medallion around Marcus's neck. Rise, Ambassador Marcus Chen, the Emperor said. Representative of the Zephyrian Empire to the human colonies. May you serve with honor and wisdom. Marcus felt the weight of the medallion against his chest. It was warm, almost alive, and he realized it was more than just a symbol. It was a communication device, a translator, and a shield generator all in one. The technology it represented was centuries ahead of anything humanity possessed. Now, the Emperor continued, let us contact your government and offer our assistance. The joint communication was broadcast simultaneously to every human colony and military installation in known space. Marcus stood beside Emperor Celestius as they delivered their message to the Colonial Defense Council on Earth. The response was everything Marcus had hoped for and feared. Ambassador Chen, General Rodriguez, the chairman of the Defense Council, spoke with barely controlled anger. You are currently wanted on charges of kidnapping, theft, and treason. What makes you think we'll listen to anything you have to say? Because 3 of our colonies are under attack and dying while we waste time on politics, Marcus replied. The hegemony played us against each other, General. They have agents in both our governments. The only way we survive this is if we work together. You expect us to trust the word of a criminal? Emperor Celestius stepped forward. General Rodriguez, I give you my word, as ruler of the Zephyrian Empire, that everything Ambassador Chen has told you is true. The hegemony orchestrated the attack on my daughter's ship to prevent crucial intelligence from reaching either of our governments. They are counting on our mutual mistrust to prevent us from coordinating our response. The general was quiet for a long moment. Even if that's true, what are you proposing? A joint military response to the hegemony attacks. Zephyrian fleets are already moving to assist your colonies. Human reinforcements can join us as soon as they arrive. Together, we can drive back the hegemony and prevent this war from spreading. And in return? Nothing, Marcus said. We do this because it's the right thing to do. The silence stretched for nearly a minute. Finally, General Rodriguez spoke. Very well. I'm authorizing joint operations with Zephyrian forces to defend human colonies. But Chen, when this is over, you and I are going to have a very long conversation. I understand, General. The next few weeks passed in a blur of activity. Marcus found himself coordinating between human and Zephyrian military forces, using his unique position to facilitate cooperation between species that had barely trusted each other before. The joint response was more successful than anyone had dared hope. Zephyrian ships arrived at the attacked colonies within hours, providing crucial support while human reinforcements made their way across space. The hegemony forces, expecting to face isolated and weakened defenses, found themselves confronting a coordinated response from two different star-faring civilizations. Within a month, the hegemony offensive had been completely repelled. Their agents within both governments were exposed and arrested. And for the first time in decades, human and Zephyrian forces had fought side by side against a common enemy. Marcus was in the embassy on Earth, preparing for yet another coordination meeting, when General Rodriguez finally came to see him. "Well, Chen," the general said, settling into a chair across from Marcus's desk. "I have to admit, you were right about the hegemony threat, and your actions probably saved millions of lives. Thank you, General." "Don't thank me yet. I still have to decide what to do about the charges against you." Marcus nodded. He had known this moment would come. "I understand." "No, I don't think you do." General Rodriguez leaned back in his chair. "The Colonial Defense Council has voted to drop all charges against you. Furthermore, you're being awarded the Star of Valor for your actions in saving Princess Lirelei and exposing the hegemony plot." Marcus stared at him. "I don't understand. It's simple. You saw someone in trouble, and you helped them regardless of the personal cost. Then, when you discovered information that could save lives, you made sure it reached the people who needed it. That's not the behavior of a criminal, Chen. That's the behavior of a hero." "I'm no hero, General. I just did what seemed right at the time." General Rodriguez smiled. "That's exactly what makes you a hero, son. Heroes don't think of themselves as heroes. They just do what needs to be done." End quote. 17. End quote. 6 months later, Marcus stood on the observation deck of the new joint human-Zephyrian space station at the Nexus Point. The facility was a symbol of the new cooperation between their species, a place where humans and Zephyrians could work together on projects that benefited both civilizations. Princess Lirelei joined him at the viewing port, looking out at the ships from dozens of different species that now visited the station regularly. "Do you miss it?" she asked. "Your old life, I mean. Flying cargo ships. Being anonymous?" Marcus thought about it. "Sometimes. It was simpler then. But I wouldn't change what happened. Even knowing what it cost you? Lyra. 6 months ago I was a nobody, cargo hauler flying from port to port with nothing but my ship and whatever job I could find. Now I'm an ambassador, representing an entire empire in negotiations that could shape the future of this entire region of space. I've got a purpose bigger than myself. And," Marcus smiled, "and I saved the life of someone who became one of my closest friends. Someone who taught me that doing the right thing is worth any cost. And I save." Lirelei was quiet for a moment. "My father wants to offer you permanent citizenship in the Empire. Full rights and privileges, including a hereditary title. That's generous of him. But I'm human, Lyra. Earth is my home, no matter how long I might be away from it. I can serve as an ambassador. I can work to build bridges between our peoples. But I'll always be human first." She smiled. "I told my father you'd say that. He said, 'It's exactly why you're the right person for this job.'" They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the stars and the ships that moved between them. Marcus thought about the journey that had brought him here, from that first distress call in a dead system to this moment of hope and possibility. He had risked everything to save a princess, and in doing so, had found something he never knew he was looking for: a purpose worth living for, and friends worth dying for. The Empire hadn't let him go, but not because they wanted to imprison him. They couldn't let him go because he had become essential to their future, just as they had become essential to his. And somewhere in the vast darkness of space, on colony worlds where children played safely under alien suns. Life continued, because one human cargo hauler had decided that saving a stranger's life was worth any risk. Marcus Chen had saved a princess. But in the end, she had saved him right back.